Hey everyone! Today we're diving into one of the most shocking events in medieval history, the Fourth Crusade. Now, when you think of a crusade, you're probably picturing knights heading off to fight in the Holy Land. But this one? It took a wild turn. So, the Fourth Crusade was called by Pope Innocent III around 132 to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. But instead of heading to Jerusalem, the Crusaders ended up targeting Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire and one of the most important Christian cities at the time. How did this happen? Well, it was a mix of bad decisions, money troubles, and the sneaky ambitions of the Venetians, who were supposed to help transport the Crusaders by sea. On April 12, 1204, the Crusaders sacked Constantinople, looting its treasures, relics, and art. The city was stripped bare, and the once great Byzantine Empire was split up among Venice and the other crusading powers. This crusade ended up being seen as one of the most ruthless and greedy campaigns of them all, far from its original religious goal. Now, let's talk about the growing divide between East and West. The Byzantines saw themselves as the defenders of Christianity, a stronghold against the Islamic forces pushing in from the East. But to the Western Europeans, the Byzantines seemed a bit. They thought the Byzantines were decadent, untrustworthy, and even suspicious in their religious practices. This split had already caused friction in earlier crusades and would continue to create problems in this one. There were also deeper issues at play, like the ongoing power struggle between the popes and emperors, and the ambitions of Western states to grab whatever they could from the weakening Byzantine Empire. Both sides blamed each other for the failures in securing the Holy Land permanently. The Byzantines were seen as lacking the will to fight the Muslims, while the Crusaders were viewed as opportunists looking to snatch up parts of the Byzantine Empire for themselves. And honestly, there was some truth to both perspectives. After the Third Crusade didn't manage to recapture Jerusalem from the legendary Muslim leader Saladin, who had died in 1193, another crusade seemed necessary. So, in 1198, Pope Innocent III called for the Fourth Crusade, offering spiritual benefits not only to those who went to fight but also to those who financed the effort. But timing was rough. Europe's most powerful kings were too busy with their own problems, and Richard the Lionheart, the great Crusader king of England, had just died in 1199, leaving a huge leadership gap. This crusade wasn't led by kings but by a bunch of second-tier nobles from northern France, like the Counts of Champagne and Blois, Baldwin of Flanders, and Simon de Montfort. They chose Boniface of Montferrat, a wealthy and experienced Italian noble with deep ties to the Byzantine Empire, as their leader. And that connection to Byzantium, it would prove to be a pretty big deal as events unfolded. So, why did the Crusaders suddenly turn on Constantinople instead of heading straight for Jerusalem? This is where things get even more interesting and a bit more complicated. You see, there was a lot of tension and mistrust between the Western European powers and the Byzantine Empire. But a key player in this whole drama was the Republic of Venice, led by Doge Enrico Dandolo. Dandolo had a score to settle with Constantinople. Years earlier, he'd been humiliated and kicked out of the city while serving as an ambassador. Now, he saw an opportunity not just for revenge but also to expand Venetian control over trade in the East, especially against rivals like Pisa and Genoa. Then there's Alexios IV Angelos, whose father, Isaac II Angelos, had been ousted as Byzantine emperor. Alexios IV was desperate to get his father back on the throne and had been reaching out to the Western powers for support. For Venice and the Crusaders, this seemed like a perfect deal. They could install a friendly emperor in Constantinople, secure some fresh supplies and funds, and then move on to Jerusalem. But of course, things didn't go quite as planned. The Byzantines had been through a lot of rebellions and power struggles recently, and putting a new emperor on the throne was never going to be that simple. Plus, there was another possible motivation at play: religious supremacy. The Pope saw a chance to finally assert the authority of the Western Church over the Eastern Church. And for the Crusaders themselves, they had their own reasons. Many of them wanted revenge for what they saw as Byzantine betrayals during earlier crusades. And let's be real, they were also after some serious loot and glory. Fast forward to June 24, 1203, when the Crusader army shows up outside Constantinople. We're talking about a huge force, thousands of knights, infantry, and Venetian sailors. Their first move, take down the Byzantine garrison at Galata, just across the Golden Horn, to lower the massive chain blocking the harbor and position themselves for a direct attack on Constantinople's seawalls. Emperor Alexios III wasn't prepared for this at all. Panicked, he fled the city on July 17, 1203. The Crusaders then tried to put their ally, Alexios IV, along with his father Isaac II, on the throne. But it quickly became clear that Alexios IV's promises to the Crusaders were empty. Thanks to some pretty effective anti-Alexios propaganda and the intimidating presence of the Crusader army right outside the city, the locals weren't having it. With the throne up for grabs, a new guy stepped in, Alexios Viodaukes, who was known as Murtzerflis because of his impressive bushy eyebrows. He took over in January 1204 after executing Alexios IV and Isaac II. Doukas was determined to defend Constantinople to the last man. He fortified the city's defenses, built up the walls, and even led a few raids against the Crusader camps. But the Crusaders were running out of options. Their supplies were low, their ships needed repairs, and they were tired of waiting. On April 9, 1204, they launched a full-scale assault on Constantinople, but the Byzantines managed to fight them off. Then, on April 12, the Crusaders tried again, focusing on the weaker sea walls around the harbor. This time they broke through. What followed was a brutal sack of the city. The Crusaders went on a rampage, killing defenders and civilians alike, looting homes, destroying priceless art, and desecrating churches. Alexios V fled, and for 3 days, Constantinople was at the mercy of the invaders. And now let's dive into what happened after the chaos in Constantinople. So, once the looting was over, the leaders had to figure out how to divide the spoils. They had already planned this out in the Partitio Romania Treaty, which basically split up the Byzantine Empire among Venice and its allies. Venice came out on top, grabbing a good chunk of Constantinople along with the Ionian Islands, Crete, Euboea, Andros, Naxos, and some key coastal points around the Sea of Marmara. With these new acquisitions, Venice pretty much dominated Mediterranean trade. Meanwhile, Count Baldwin of Flanders became the first Latin emperor of Constantinople on May 9, 1204, getting the lion's share of the city and about a quarter of the empire, including Thrace, parts of Asia Minor, and several Aegean islands. Boniface of Montferrat wasn't left out. He took control of Thessalonica and formed a new kingdom there, which also included Athens and Macedonia. However, Baldwin's reign was short-lived. He was captured in a battle with the Bulgars defending his territory in Thrace and died in a Bulgarian prison in 1205. Afterward, William I Champlitte and Geoffrey I Villardouin established a Latin principality in the Peloponnese, while the French Duke Othon de la Roche grabbed Attica and Boeotia. But the story didn't end there. The Byzantine Empire was eventually restored in 1261, though it was just a shadow of its former self. This happened when forces from the Empire of Nicaea, the stronghold for the exiled Byzantines, retook Constantinople. Emperor Michael VIII was able to reclaim the throne in the palace of his Byzantine predecessors. Now, you might be wondering, what about the original goal of the Fourth Crusade, the Holy Land? Well, while Constantinople's fall stole the spotlight, a small group of crusaders actually made it to the Middle East. Led by Renard II of Dampierre, this contingent arrived in April 1203, albeit late and without enough numbers to take on Jerusalem or any other major city. They did, however, assist the remaining Latin states in holding on to their precarious positions in the Muslim-dominated region. In September 1203, this small force, along with the tiny kingdom of Jerusalem, launched a few attacks on minor targets in Muslim-held Galilee, Unfortunately, a plague in Acre wiped out half of the Crusader force. However, the ruler of Damascus, al-Malik al-Adil, seemed more interested in avoiding a direct confrontation, so he conceded some territories to the Kingdom of Jerusalem, including Nazareth, Jaffa, Ramla, and a strip of land near Sidon. In August 1204, the Crusaders even managed to win a couple of battles against forces from Hama in central Syria. But in the grand scheme of things, these victories were pretty minor compared to what Pope Innocent III had originally envisioned. With the Fifth Crusade shifting focus to North Africa and Egypt, it wasn't until the Sixth Crusade that Christian ambitions in the Middle East were revived. But that's a story for another time. Bye guys.